The station called Pale Horizon floated in the dark space between dead stars. It was old and ugly, and full of people who had nowhere else to go. The air smelled like rust and cheap food and broken dreams. This was where the galaxy sent its failures, its criminals, and its forgotten. Kang Do-hyun stepped off the transport ship with nothing but a bag over his shoulder and a synthesizer keyboard under his arm. He was 29 years old, thin from months of bad eating, and his eyes carried the tired look of someone who had stopped hoping for good things. He was human, from Earth's dying colonies, and he had scraped together every credit he owned to buy passage to this miserable place. It was supposed to be a waypoint. He was supposed to catch another ship to the frontier worlds, where humans were building new lives far from the mistakes of the old ones. But when he checked his account at the docking terminal, the numbers showed 0. Someone had stolen everything during the journey. A docking scam, the board clerk told him. Happened all the time. Do-hyun stood in the corridor for a long moment, staring at the screen. Then he laughed. It was not a happy sound. He picked up his keyboard and walked into the station's lower levels, where the lights flickered and the people looked just as lost as he felt. He found a spot in the market corridor, between a stall selling fake medicine and another selling meat from animals he did not want to think about. He set up his keyboard on an empty crate, plugged it into a small speaker he had built himself, and started to play. The beat was old Earth hip-hop, the kind his grandfather used to love. Do-hyun added his own touch, mixing in sounds he had collected from a dozen worlds. And then he opened his mouth and rapped in Korean, words tumbling out fast and sharp about pain and loss and the stubborn refusal to die quietly. The aliens walking past did not understand the words. They were Sithal with their scaled skin and vertical pupils. They were Krevik with their 4 arms and clicking speech. They were a dozen other species that Do-hyun could not name. But some of them stopped. They did not know why. Something in the rhythm touched a part of them that language could not reach. Do-hyun performed for 3 hours. He earned enough credits for 1 meal and a water bottle. It was not much. But when he finished, his chest felt lighter than it had in months. Making noise reminded him that he was still alive. In the darkest corner of the lowest bar on Pale Horizon, a figure sat alone. He was Sithal, 7 feet tall even while sitting, with scales that should have been black as obsidian but had faded to the dull gray of ash. His name was Veltharion, and once he had been the Dragon King of the Sithal Dominion. Once 100 worlds had bowed to him. Once he could breathe fire hot enough to melt starship hulls. Now he sat in filth, drinking something that burned his throat and dulled his memories. His crown was gone. His throne was gone. His fire was gone, ripped from him in a ritual of exile that left him less than nothing in the eyes of his people. He had been sitting in this bar for 2 years, waiting to feel something other than emptiness. He heard the humans' music through the thin walls. At first, he ignored it. What did he care about the noise of lesser beings? But the sound kept reaching him, slipping past his defenses like water through cracks in stone. The rhythm reminded him of something. The coronation drums of his homeworld. The war hymns that his warriors sang before battle. Songs that were now forbidden to him. Veltharion stood and walked toward the sound. He found the human in the market corridor, packing up his equipment. A pair of station security officers were approaching, their weapons visible. Busking without a permit, they said. The human would have to come with them. Everyone knew what that meant. A beating in a back room, maybe worse. Do-hyun looked at the officers with tired eyes. He was too exhausted to run and too stubborn to beg. He simply waited for whatever came next. Veltharion did not plan to interfere. He had no reason to help this stranger. But his body moved before his mind caught up, and suddenly he was standing between the human and the officers. The security men looked up at the towering Sithal and saw something in his eyes that made them step back. They did not know who he was, but they knew danger when they saw it. The officers left, muttering about not getting paid enough. Valtharion turned and looked down at the human, who stared back without fear. That was strange. Most beings feared the Sithal, even an exiled one. Dohyun bowed his head slightly, a gesture of thanks, not submission. Then he asked if the Sithal wanted to share a drink. They sat together in a corner of the bar where Valtharion had been wasting his years. The human drank something cheap and clear. Valtharion drank his usual poison. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Valtharion asked the question that had been burning in his mind. Why did the human make such noise? What was the purpose of standing in a dirty corridor and shouting at strangers who could not understand? Dohyun thought about the question. He could have given many answers. He could have talked about art or expression or the human need to create. But those were lies dressed in pretty words. So he told the truth instead. He said that if he stopped making noise, he would forget that he was still alive. The music was not for the listeners. It was for him. It was proof that he existed, that he had not yet disappeared into the darkness. Valtharion felt something crack inside his chest. It was a small crack, barely noticeable. But it was the first thing he had felt in 2 years. He told the human a story. He spoke of an ancient prophecy among his people, a legend about a voice from the void. This voice would one day open the gate of remaking, a mythical portal to another dimension where fallen kings could reclaim their honor and the broken could be made whole. Valtharion had always dismissed it as children's tales. But sitting in this filthy bar, looking at a human who made noise just to remember he was alive, the old Dragon King wondered if he had been wrong. Dohyun listened to the story. He did not believe in prophecies or magic gates, but he believed in the look in the Sithal's eyes. It was the same look he saw in the mirror every morning. The look of someone who had lost everything and was searching for a reason to keep going. He raised his glass. Valtharion raised his. They drank together, two exiles in a station full of the forgotten, and for one moment, neither of them felt quite so alone. Outside, the dead stars watched in silence, and somewhere in the void, something ancient stirred in its sleep. 3 weeks passed on Pale Horizon. Dohyun performed every day in the market corridor, and every night Valtharion came to listen from the shadows. They shared drinks afterward, speaking little but understanding much. It was a strange friendship between a human who had nothing and a dragon king who had lost everything. Then the ship arrived, and everything changed. Yoon Jisoo stepped onto the station with fire in her eyes. She was 27, short and strong, with oil-stained hands that showed her work as an engineer. She had been searching for Dohyun across 3 star systems, spending money she did not have, chasing rumors and dead ends. Now she had finally found him, and she was furious. She found him in his usual spot, playing his keyboard for a handful of alien listeners. When he saw her, his fingers stopped on the keys. His face went pale. Jisoo walked up to him and slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed through the corridor. The aliens scattered, wanting no part of human drama. She called him a coward. She called him a fool. She asked him what he was thinking, running away from everything and everyone who cared about him. Did he know how worried his mother was? Did he know that Jisoo had spent 6 months tracking him down? Dohyun said nothing. He just stood there, taking her words like blows. When she finally ran out of anger, he spoke quietly. He said he was sorry. He said he could not go back. He said that the person she was looking for did not exist anymore. Jisoo wanted to hit him again. Instead, she sat down on the dirty floor and cried. From the shadows, Valtharion watched. He did not interfere. This was not his place. But he saw something in the woman's tears that he recognized. She was not crying from anger. She was crying because she loved someone who had given up on himself. Later, In the bar, the three of them sat together. Jisoo had calmed down enough to listen. Do-hyun told her about the station, about his performances, about the strange Sithal who had become something like a friend. He did not tell her about the gate of remaking. He was not sure he believed in it himself. Jisoo studied Veltharion with curious eyes. She had never met a Sithal before. She knew them only from stories. A proud warrior race, rulers of a vast dominion, famous for their fire breath and their strict codes of honor. This one did not look proud. He looked tired and sad and empty. She asked him directly what his story was. Veltharion hesitated. He had not spoken of his past to anyone except Do-hyun. But something about this human woman made him want to talk. Perhaps it was the way she looked at him without fear or judgment. He told her everything. He had been the Dragon King, chosen by his people for his wisdom and his strength. He had ruled well for 30 years. But his own council had turned against him. They forged evidence of crimes he did not commit. They accused him of betraying his people to enemy powers. Before he could defend himself, they performed the ritual of stripping. They tore away his title, his wealth, his home, and his fire. The flame that lived inside every Sithal warrior, the source of their power and their identity, was ripped from his chest. To the Sithal, a being without fire was worse than dead. He was erased. His name was forbidden. His family was ordered to forget he existed. Jisoo listened in silence. When Veltharion finished, she asked only one question. Why did they do it? Veltharion shook his great head. He still did not know. Politics, perhaps. Greed. Fear of his growing power. It did not matter anymore. The result was the same. He was nothing. A new voice spoke from the doorway. Kravik stepped into the bar, a Sithal warrior almost as tall as Veltharion, covered in scars from a lifetime of battles. He had followed his king into exile, giving up his own honor to serve a master the rest of their people considered dead. Kravik looked at Do-hyun with contempt. He had watched his king waste nights, drinking with this weak human, listening to his strange music. It was beneath them. It was shameful. It was shameful. He told Veltharion that they should leave this place. Find a quiet corner of the galaxy to die with dignity. Do-hyun stood up slowly. He was smaller than Kravik, weaker, unarmed. But he did not back down. He asked Kravik what dignity meant to someone who had already lost everything. He asked if hiding in a dark corner was really better than standing in the light and making noise. Then he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He started to rap. The words came fast, in Korean that Kravik could not understand. But the meaning was clear in the rhythm and the tone. Do-hyun spoke about Kravik's loyalty, his years of service, his devotion to a king who no longer wore a crown. He spoke about the pain of watching someone you love give up. He spoke about the shame of not being able to save them. Kravik's scales flushed dark with emotion. He wanted to strike the human down, but the words kept coming, cutting deeper than any blade. Do-hyun was not attacking him. He was seeing him, seeing the grief and guilt that Kravik had hidden behind anger and contempt. When Do-hyun finished, silence filled the bar. Kravik's hands were shaking. He turned and walked out without a word. Veltharion stared at Do-hyun with new eyes. He asked the human how he did that, how he found the truth inside someone and pulled it out into the open. Do-hyun shrugged. He said it was not magic. It was just honesty set to a beat. Anyone could do it if they were willing to look and listen. Veltharion made a decision. He asked Do-hyun to teach him. Not music exactly, but how to speak when words had been taken away. How to roar without fire. Do-hyun was surprised. He had never taught anyone before. But looking at the old Dragon King, he saw something he recognized. A spark that had not quite died. A small fire still burning in the ashes. He said yes. Meanwhile, Jisoo could not sleep. She sat in her tiny rented room, searching through old databases and forbidden archives. The Gate of Remaking. It sounded like a fairy tale, but she had seen the look on Valtharian's face when he spoke of it. He wanted to believe. After hours of searching, she found something that made her blood run cold. The gate was real. It existed in a dead star system called HFY. And 10,000 years ago, a Sithal emperor had tried to open it. He had failed. The backlash from the gate had destroyed every planet in the system. Billions had died, but that was not the part that frightened Jisoo. The record showed why the emperor had failed. The gate did not respond to power or strength or royal blood. It responded only to truth, and the last being to face the gate had not been truthful enough. She closed her screen and sat in the darkness, wondering what she had gotten herself into. The training began in an abandoned section of Pale Horizon's upper levels. Old machinery filled the space, rusted and silent. Dahyun cleared a small area and set up his equipment. Valtharian stood before him, looking uncomfortable and out of place. Teaching a 7-foot dragon king to rap was not easy. Dahyun started with the basics. Breath control, rhythm, timing. These things were simple for him, learned through years of practice. But Valtharian struggled. His culture taught control and suppression. Emotions were weakness. Showing pain was shameful. Every time Dahyun asked him to dig deeper, to find something real inside himself, the old king shut down. Days passed. Progress was slow. Valtharian could follow a beat, but his words were empty. He spoke of his past like he was reading from a report. Facts without feeling. Truth without weight. Dahyun grew frustrated. He pushed harder, demanding more honesty, more vulnerability. Valtharian resisted. One night, the training session ended in anger. The Dragon King stormed out, and Dahyun threw his keyboard against the wall. Jisoo found him sitting among the broken pieces. She sat beside him and asked what was wrong. Dahyun said he was failing. He could not reach Valtharian. The king was locked inside walls built over centuries, and Dahyun did not have the key. Jisoo was quiet for a moment. Then she told Dahyun something she had discovered in her research. The prophecy about the Gate of Remaking had been translated many times over thousands of years. Most translations were wrong or incomplete, but she had found an old text written in a dead language that gave the original words. The prophecy said that when the crownless king spoke his truth to the void, and a child of the silent world gave voice to the voiceless, the gate would open. But only grief sung as joy could turn the key. Dahyun asked what that meant. Jisoo said she was not sure, but she thought it meant that Valtharian could not just speak about his pain. He had to transform it. Take the worst moment of his life and turn it into something beautiful. Dahyun understood. It was the hardest thing any performer could do. To stand in front of the world and bleed, and make that bleeding into art. The next day, Kravik brought terrible news. Assassins had arrived on the station. Sithal killers sent by someone powerful. Someone who wanted Valtharian dead. The attack came that night. They were in the training room when the door exploded inward. 3 Sithal warriors charged in, blades drawn, scales gleaming with the fire that Valtharian had lost. Kravik met them head-on, his own sword flashing. He was outnumbered but fearless. Jisoo grabbed Dahyun and pulled him behind a machine. She had a small pistol, but she had never killed anyone before. Her hands shook as she aimed at shadows. Valtharian stood frozen. Once, he would have burned these attackers to ash with a single breath. Now he was helpless, useless. The shame of it paralyzed him. Kravik fell. A blade cut deep into his side, and he collapsed with a roar of pain. The assassin stepped over his body and advanced on Valtharian. Dahyun did something insane. He ran out from behind the machine, not toward safety, but toward the ruined speaker system in the corner. His fingers flew across the controls, rerouting power, creating connections that should not have worked. The speakers crackled to life, and Do-hyun opened his mouth and screamed. It was not music. It was pure sound, raw and primal, amplified through the station's damaged systems until it became a weapon. The assassins clutched their heads as the sonic assault tore through them. Their scales vibrated painfully. Their fire flickered and died. Jisoo grabbed Veltharion and Kravik and dragged them toward the exit. Do-hyun kept screaming, his voice breaking, blood running from his nose. When they were clear, he finally stopped and ran after them. They fled through the station's back passages, Kravik bleeding heavily, Jisoo trying to hold his wound closed. They found an old storage room and sealed themselves inside. Jisoo worked on Kravik through the night. She was not a doctor, but she knew enough to keep him alive. In his fevered sleep, the warrior spoke of old times. He talked about the King Veltharion used to be, just merciful, beloved by his people. A ruler who would rather die than see his subjects suffer. Jisoo looked at Veltharion with new understanding. This broken creature was not who he was supposed to be. Something precious had been stolen from him. When morning came, they knew they could not stay. Whoever sent the assassins would send more. They needed to move, to find answers, to find the gate. Jisoo knew someone who might help. A human woman named Beek Umbi, who dealt in forbidden knowledge on a trade moon called HFY. She had contacts everywhere, access to secrets that others could not reach. If anyone had information about the Gate of Remaking, it was her. They stole a small ship and fled Pale Horizon. The journey to HFY took 4 days. In that time, Kravik recovered slowly, and Veltharion sat alone in the cargo hold, staring at nothing. Do-hyun found him there on the 3rd night. He sat down beside the Dragon King and waited. Finally, Veltharion spoke. He asked Do-hyun why he had risked his life, why he had used his voice as a weapon to save someone he barely knew. Do-hyun thought about the question. Then he said that he did not know Veltharion well, but he knew the look in his eyes, the look of someone who believed they had nothing left to lose. Do-hyun had worn that look himself for a long time, and he knew how dangerous it was. He said that maybe he saved Veltharion because he wished someone had saved him, back when he was standing on a bridge in the rain, trying to decide if he wanted to keep living. Veltharion turned to look at him. The human had never spoken of this before. Do-hyun told him the truth. Years ago, on Earth, he had been a rising musician. People said he had real talent. Then someone accused him of stealing songs, of plagiarism. The accusation was false, but it did not matter. His fans turned on him. His family believed the lies. He lost everything overnight. He had walked to a bridge on a cold night, rain soaking through his clothes, and stood at the edge for a long time. In the end, he did not jump. Not because he found hope, but because he was too stubborn to let the liars win. So he ran. He ran across the galaxy, trying to outrun the shame. It did not work. The shame followed him everywhere, but at least he was still alive to feel it. Veltharion listened without speaking. When Do-hyun finished, the Dragon King reached out and placed his massive hand on the human's shoulder. It was a gesture his people used to show deep respect. Do-hyun probably did not know that, but somehow he seemed to understand. They landed on HFY the next morning. Beek Umbi was waiting for them in a crowded market square. She was older than Do-hyun expected, with gray hair and clever eyes that missed nothing. She was also dying. A genetic disease was slowly shutting down her organs. She had maybe a year left. She agreed to help them find the gate, but she had a price. She wanted to go through it herself. The dimension beyond the gate was said to remake all things. She wanted a chance to be remade, Jisoo agreed for all of them. They had no other choice. Yoonbi took them to her hidden archive and showed them what she knew. The gate was real. It floated in the dead system of HFY, among the debris of planets destroyed 10,000 years ago. No one had approached it since the Great Failure. But she had something more valuable than location. She had the original prophecy in the original language, and she could finally translate it properly. Her voice was soft as she read the ancient words. When the crownless king speaks his truth to the void, and a child of the silent world gives voice to the voiceless, the gate shall open. But only grief sung as joy can turn the key. Everyone was silent. Then Yoonbi looked at Veltharion and told him what the prophecy meant. He had to perform his downfall. He had to take the worst moment of his life, the betrayal, the stripping, the loss of everything, and transform it into something triumphant. He had to stand before the gate and rap about his grief and make it beautiful. Veltharion's gray scales seemed to darken. He said he did not know if he could do that. Do-hyun stepped forward. He said they would find out together. Then Yoonbi told them the bad news. Someone else had learned where they were going. A Sigil lord named Hyunsik, the one who had orchestrated Veltharion's downfall, was coming with a war fleet. He feared the prophecy. He would stop at nothing to keep the gate closed. They had 3 days to reach HFY before Hyunsik caught them. The race had begun. The journey to HFY was supposed to take 3 days. They pushed the engines harder and made it in 2.5. But those hours felt like years. In the small ship's cargo hold, Do-hyun and Veltharion worked without rest. The performance had to be perfect. It had to be true. And Veltharion was still locked behind walls he had built over centuries. Do-hyun pushed him harder than before. He demanded details, names, faces. He wanted to know exactly what happened on the day Veltharion lost everything. The Dragon King resisted. His voice grew cold. He spoke in short sentences, keeping distance between himself and his memories. Finally, Do-hyun lost his temper. He shouted that this was not working. He said Veltharion was hiding, still hiding, even now. That if he could not face his own truth, the gate would kill them all just like it killed the Emperor 10,000 years ago. Veltharion rose to his full height, scales darkening with anger. He told Do-hyun that he did not understand. He could never understand. Humans lived short lives and felt things freely. The Sithal were different. They carried their pain inside, locked away where it could not hurt them or anyone else. Do-hyun laughed bitterly. He asked if that was working. He asked if locking away the pain had made Veltharion happy. Had it brought back his throne? His family? His fire? The words hit like physical blows. Veltharion turned away. His voice was rough when he spoke again. He said things that could not be taken back. He called Do-hyun a failure, a coward who ran from his own world. He said the human had no right to speak of facing pain when he had spent years fleeing from his own. Do-hyun went silent. His face emptied of expression. Without a word, he picked up his keyboard and left the cargo hold. Jisoo found him sitting alone in the cockpit, staring at the stars streaming past. She sat beside him and waited. After a long time, Do-hyun spoke. He said Veltharion was right. He was a coward. He had run from everything. His home, his shame, his family. He had been running so long he did not know how to stop. Jisoo shook her head. She told him that running was not the same as cowardice. Sometimes running was survival. Sometimes it was the only way to stay alive long enough to find your way back. She told him something else. She told him about the night she almost gave up on finding him. She had run out of money, out of leads, out of hope. She sat in a cheap hotel room on a planet she could not even name, and she almost bought a ticket home. But she did not, because she remembered something Do-hyun had said years ago back when they were young and stupid and full of dreams. He had said that music was not about being perfect. It was about being honest. And she wanted to hear him be honest one more time. Do-hyun looked at her. Something cracked inside his chest. He asked why she had come so far for someone like him. Jisoo smiled sadly. She said she did not know. Maybe because she loved him. Maybe because she was stubborn. Maybe because the galaxy was too big and too dark to face alone, and he was the only person who ever made her feel less alone. Do-hyun did not know what to say, so he did the only thing he knew how to do. He started to play. The music was soft at first. A slow beat, gentle notes floating in the air. Then his voice came, quiet and broken, singing about that night on the bridge. The rain, the cold, the moment when he looked down at the dark water and wondered if anyone would miss him. He sang about choosing to live, not because he found hope, but because he was angry. Angry at the people who lied about him. Angry at himself for believing he deserved their hate. Angry enough to keep breathing out of spite. And then, slowly, the anger turned into something else. Not joy, exactly, but something close. Defiance. Survival. The stubborn refusal to disappear. Jisoo wiped tears from her face. She had never heard him perform like this. Raw and real and terrifying in its honesty. Neither of them noticed Valthurion standing in the doorway, listening to every word. The Dragon King returned to the cargo hold without speaking. He sat in the darkness for a long time, thinking about what he had heard. The human had done what Valthurion could not. He had taken his worst moment and turned it into truth, into art. When Do-hyun came to find him hours later, Valthurion did not apologize. His people did not apologize with words. Instead, he asked Do-hyun to tell him about that night. All of it. Every detail the human could remember. Do-hyun was surprised. But he sat down and talked. He talked until his voice was hoarse, until there was nothing left to say. When he finished, Valthurion spoke. He told Do-hyun about his own worst moment. Not the ritual of stripping, though that was terrible. Something worse. His daughter. Her name was Sereth. She was young and proud, and believed her father was the greatest king in history. When the council accused him, she came to see him in his cell. She looked at him with eyes full of doubt and asked if the accusations were true. Valthurion told her no. He told her he was innocent, but she did not believe him. She turned and walked away without looking back. And that was the last time he ever saw her. His mate, Valera, had died of shame 6 months later. The healers said her heart simply stopped. Valthurion knew the truth. She had willed herself to die rather than live with the disgrace. He had lost everything that day. Not his crown or his fire. His family. The only things that truly mattered. Do-hyun listened in silence. When Valthurion finished, the human nodded slowly. He said he understood now. He said they would build the performance around this. Not the politics or the betrayal, but the loss. The grief. The moment when a daughter looked at her father and chose not to believe. Valthurion asked how he could turn that into something triumphant. How could grief become joy? Do-hyun said he did not know yet. But they would find out together. They arrived at Ashavar the next morning. The system was a graveyard. Shattered remains of planets floated in the void. Debris fields stretching for millions of kilometers. The sensors showed ghost signals everywhere, false readings bouncing off dead rocks. Somewhere in this chaos, the gate waited. Jisoo guided them through the debris with careful skill. Yoonbi monitored the ancient energy signatures, searching for the gate's location. Kravik, still healing from his wounds, stood guard at the weapons console. Then they found it. The gate of remaking hung in the emptiness between broken worlds. It was a ring of impossible geometry, shapes that hurt the eyes to look at. angles that seemed to point in directions that should not exist. It was beautiful and terrible and completely silent. Baltharion stared at it through the viewport. 10,000 years ago, an emperor had died trying to open this thing. Billions had burned in the backlash. And now they were going to try again. Before anyone could speak, the alarm screamed to life. Yunsik had arrived early. His war fleet dropped out of hyperspace around them, dozens of ships bristling with weapons. There was nowhere to run. A communication signal reached them. Lord Yunzik's face appeared on the screen. He was Sithil, like Veltharion, but his scales were dark and healthy, his eyes burning with fire. He smiled when he saw the exiled king. He said he had come to end this foolishness. The prophecy was nonsense, and Veltharion was a dead thing that should have had the decency to stop moving years ago. Veltharion stepped forward to face the screen. His voice was steady when he spoke. He challenged Hyunsik, not to battle, but to witness. He would attempt to open the gate. If he failed, he would die, and Hyunsik would win forever. But if he succeeded, the truth about who had really betrayed whom would be revealed to all. Hyunsik laughed. He called it a desperate gamble from a desperate fool. But his eyes showed a flicker of fear. What if the prophecy was real? What if the gate could truly expose his crimes? In the end, his arrogance won. He agreed to watch. He was certain the gate would kill them all, solving his problem permanently. Do-hyun looked at Veltharion. This was it. Everything they had worked for came down to this moment. The Dragon King met his eyes and nodded. He was ready. Or at least, he hoped he was. Jisoo worked through the night, connecting their small ship's communication system to every relay they could reach. Yunbi helped, using her network of contacts to spread the signal further. By morning, they had patched into broadcast channels across 100 star systems. Millions of beings would witness what happened next. Eunbi recorded a message explaining what viewers were about to see. She spoke of the Gate of Remaking, the ancient prophecy, and the exiled king who would attempt to open it. She did not hide the danger. If this failed, they would all die. But if it succeeded, truths hidden for decades would finally come to light. The message went out. Ships across the galaxy stopped to watch. On Sithal Prime, citizens gathered around screens in public squares. On human colonies, on alien worlds, everywhere the signal reached. People waited. Hyon's SIK single quotes S fleet surrounded them, weapons aimed and ready. The Lord himself watched from his command ship, still confident that he was about to witness nothing but death. Inside their small vessel, Do-hyun set up his equipment. His synthesizer keyboard, his speakers, his mixing board. Everything old and patched together, and somehow still working. He tested the sound levels and nodded to himself. Kravik stood by the airlock, guarding against any last-minute attack. His wounds still pained him, but his eyes were clear. He had made peace with whatever came next. Veltharion stood alone, looking out at the gate. It hung in the void, silent and waiting. He could feel something coming from it. Not sound, not light, but a presence. It was aware of them. Do-hyun walked up beside him. He asked if the Dragon King was ready. Veltharion said he did not know. He said he was afraid. Do-hyun nodded. He said that was good. Fear meant there was something left worth losing. He had been afraid on that bridge years ago. Afraid of dying, yes, but more afraid of being forgotten. Of disappearing without anyone noticing. He told Veltharion that this was their chance. Not just to open the gate, but to prove that they had existed. That their pain meant something. That the darkness had not won. Veltharion turned to look at him. For a moment, the Dragon King and the human stood eye to eye. Two broken creatures who had found each other in a filthy bar at the edge of nowhere. Then Veltharion reached out and gripped Do-hyun's shoulder. He said, "Thank you. Not for the training or the friendship, for reminding him that making noise was proof of survival. They walked to the cargo hold together. Jisoo had cleared a space and set up cameras. The broadcast was live. Millions were watching. Daeun sat at his keyboard and began to play. The beat started slow. It was built from pieces of many worlds. Sithal war drums thundered beneath the melody. Korean pansori rhythms wove through the harmony. Earth hip-hop bass pulsed like a heartbeat. Alien harmonics drifted through like ghosts. It should not have worked. The sounds were too different, too strange. But somehow they came together into something new. Something that had never existed before. Veltharion stepped forward. His gray scales caught the light as he faced the cameras, faced the gate, faced his own past. He began to speak. His voice was rough at first, uncertain. He spoke of his coronation day, when the crown was placed on his head and his people cheered his name. He spoke of the pride he felt, the weight of responsibility, the promise he made to serve his kingdom well. The gate remained silent. He continued. He spoke of the betrayal, the forged evidence, the council members who looked away as lies destroyed him. His voice cracked, but he did not stop. Still, the gate was silent. Daeun changed the beat, adding a call and response rhythm. He joined his voice to Veltharion's, rapping about his own exile, his own shame, his own years of running. 2 voices, 2 languages, 2 species, but one truth. The gate stirred. A faint light flickered at its edges. Veltharion felt something break inside him. The walls he had built over centuries began to crumble. And for the first time, he spoke of what truly mattered. He spoke of Sereth, his daughter. He described her smile, her laughter, the way she used to sit on his knee and ask him to tell stories of ancient heroes. He described the day she came to his cell and looked at him with doubt in her eyes. His voice shook. Tears, something the Sithal almost never shed, ran down his scaled face. He spoke of Valera, his mate. Her kindness, her strength, the way she believed in him even when he doubted himself. He spoke of learning that she had died of shame, of knowing that his existence had killed her. The gate blazed brighter. The geometry shifted. Something was awakening. Duhayan increased the tempo. His voice rose, encouraging Veltharion, supporting him, refusing to let him fall. And then came the turn. Veltharion spoke of the aftermath. The years of emptiness. The nights when he wished he had died instead of lived. But then his voice changed. The grief remained, but something new grew within it. He spoke of meeting a strange human in a filthy bar. A human who made noise just to remember he was alive. He spoke of learning that survival could be an act of defiance. That grief did not have to be the end of the story. He spoke of Jisoo, who crossed the galaxy to save someone she loved. Of Kravik, who gave up everything to follow a king who had nothing left. Of Yumbi, who faced death with courage and demanded a chance to live. He spoke of Daeun, who stood on a bridge in the rain and chose to keep breathing. The beat swelled. Veltharion's voice grew stronger. He was not hiding anymore. He was not running. He was standing in the light and screaming his truth at the universe. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not beg for his throne back. Instead, he forgave. He forgave the council that betrayed him. He forgave his daughter for doubting him. He even forgave Yunsik, whose lies had destroyed everything. Not because they deserved it, but because the anger had been drowning him for too long, and he refused to let it drag him under anymore. The gate opened. Light poured from it, not harsh or blinding, but warm, like sunlight after a long winter. And within that light, visions appeared. Every being watching across 100 systems saw the same thing. They saw Hyunsik. They saw him planning the betrayal, forging evidence, murdering witnesses who knew the truth. They saw every crime he had committed, every lie he had told, played out in perfect clarity, on his command ship, Hyunsik screamed for his crew to destroy the transmission. But they did not obey. They were watching the visions too. They were seeing what their lord truly was. His own fleet turned on him. Ships that had served him for decades aimed their weapons at his vessel. He had nowhere to run. But Veltharion did not call for his death. He stood before the gate, light streaming around him, and said only that Hyunsik would face the judgment of their people. Not revenge, justice. The gate's light washed over them all. Yumbi gasped as strength returned to her failing body. The disease that had been killing her was gone, remade into health. Kravik's scars faded, old wounds healing in moments, and Veltharion changed. His scales shifted from ash gray back to pure obsidian, darker and deeper than they had ever been. His body straightened, years of despair lifting from his shoulders. And when he exhaled, fire came, soft at first, then growing. Not the weapon fire of a warrior, but something warmer, something alive. The fire that had been torn from him was back, and it burned brighter than before. Doyen stopped playing. He stared at Veltharion with exhausted eyes, blood still drying on his face from the strain of the performance. A grin spread across his features. He said that was not bad for a first show. Veltharion laughed. It was a sound he had not made in years, full and genuine and free. He said he had a good teacher. The gate slowly dimmed, its purpose fulfilled, but it did not close entirely. It hung in the void, waiting. Perhaps there would be others who needed to speak their truth someday. In the aftermath, everything changed. The Sithol Dominion fractured. Some called for Veltharion to return and take his throne. Others resisted, afraid of what his return might mean. Veltharion refused the crown. He was not that person anymore. The king who had ruled 100 worlds was gone. In his place was something new. Something that had been forged in grief and reborn in truth. Do-Yoon and Jisoo stayed with him. They had come too far together to separate now. Yumbi, healthy and whole, documented their story for the galaxy to see. Kravik remained as well, no longer just a bodyguard but a friend. They became something the galaxy had never seen before. A touring group, traveling from world to world, performing for anyone who would listen. A former Dragon King and a human rapper, singing about pain and survival and the stubborn refusal to be silent. They called themselves the Exiles. Their fame spread across star systems. Beings who had never felt anything came to their shows and wept for the first time in their lives. The broken and the lost found something in their music that helped them remember how to hope. 1 year after the gate opened, they stood on a small stage on a backwater planet. The crowd was mixed, humans and Sithol and a dozen other species pressed together, waiting. Doyen checked his equipment one last time. Veltharion stood beside him, scales gleaming black in the stage lights. Behind them, Kravik tested the drums he had learned to play. Jisoo managed the sound system. Yumbi recorded everything. The audience fell silent. Do-Hyun counted them in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Veltharion took a breath. Warm fire flickered behind his teeth. And somewhere in the void, the gate of remaking shimmered. Not opening, but listening. Waiting for the next truth brave enough to be spoken aloud. The music began.